Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Thanks for joining me today. It's Cult Day here on Dark Hearts, and today I've got one of the biggest cult stories of all time, Keith Raniere and NXIVM. Many of you have heard of this cult, but did you know there are shocking new allegations made by none other than the famous attorney Alan Dershowitz that the FBI altered some of the evidence that put Keith Raniere in prison for life.
This is a government cover-up. We now have 7 experts and 1 expert hired by Newsweek magazine, an outside expert, who assure us that the main piece of evidence used to convict this man and sentence him to life imprisonment was tampered with and manipulated.
Today, we are going to go over the most interesting elements of this story as a refresher, and then we are going to discuss the new allegations that there was a conspiracy to frame Keith Raniere for things he did not do. So you're kind of getting 2 for 1 today, a cult story and a conspiracy story. This is wild. This is the story of the infamous Hollywood sex cult, NXIVM. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. Come with me back to 1998. Cell phones were new. Monica Lewinsky was in the news every day. John Glenn went to space. And I started dating this guy after my separation, not knowing that he was about to ruin the single and mingle phase of my life I had planned. Look at this hair. Yes, this is Jason. How could I resist? He was a beautiful grunge god. In the 90s, New Age spirituality was taking over, and everyone was deeply into self-help gurus like Tony Robbins and Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra. But there was a wannabe guru forming a plan of building an empire, and his name was Keith Raniere. Keith Raniere, the founder of NXIVM, was born on August 26, 1960, in Brooklyn, New York. In 1998, Raniere co-founded NXIVM, a purported self-help organization based in Albany, New York. NXIVM offered personal and professional development seminars, attracting a wide range of individuals, including celebrities and wealthy individuals. However, the organization operated as a pyramid scheme with Raniere at the top. And whatever he claims his intentions were, what actually happened became a sex cult where women were abused, manipulated, and eventually branded with a hot iron, leaving them wearing Keith Raniere's initials for the rest of their lives. Oh, another set of initials would be added later on, those of Allison Mack. What a psycho. We're getting there. I know many of you know this story, so we're just going to take a short walk through the story. It's been out of the news for years, but it is back like a cockroach you can't kill. Keith Raniere is back. So a bit of a refresher, and then we're going to get to the shocking update on this case because it is crazy. Before launching NXIVM, Keith Raniere ran a pyramid scheme that brought in $33 million a year. I won't go into the details of that today, but he had 250,000 people signed up to pay a monthly fee to this company. It eventually collapsed, and that left Keith wondering, well, what am I going to do now? Well, if you've got the mind of a raging narcissist with no conscience or morality, of course you get into culting. Duh. What better way to force people to give you all their money, the accolades you feel you deserve, and get women to have sex with you, women who would usually not give you a second look? What better way than to form a cult and position yourself at the top? Keith joins forces with Nancy Salzman, a former psychiatric nurse, and together they form NXIVM. Nancy Salzman has training in neurolinguistics programming, which involves hypnosis and techniques of mirroring another individual in order to create a deep connection. Oh, there's some deep connecting in this story. Some deep connecting. Before long, as we so often see in cults, vulnerable people were joining this program in hopes of bettering their lives. People who had phobias like flying and closed spaces were taking sessions with Nancy, who would look into their eyes and whisper positive affirmations to them. She delved into their childhoods to root out the causes of their fears and promised that if they did what she told them to, she could ferret out those deep-seated traumas and help people overcome their phobias. Nancy and Keith were really big on telling people that they could upgrade their lives. Upgrading became a big thing in this cult. Within a few years, this is just alarming, the cult had 18,000 members, all believing that this program, this method, could upgrade their life experience. What was actually happening is incredibly insidious. Nancy Salzman would preach that women needed to be more independent. They shouldn't rely on a man. She told them that if their relationships didn't work out, they could always move back in with their dads because their fathers were their first loves. That's not creepy at all. So some of the women, keep this in mind, the followers were mainly women. They began advancing in the ranks of the cult, and they were given the title of masters. You know what's coming next. The other women were slaves. Super healthy, very not weird, not racist, nothing to see here. Just people calling themselves masters and slaves. Don't you do that in your daily life? Let's talk briefly about these sessions that were going on inside the group. The women were told that they were now part of a sisterhood. The masters were told that they were the keepers of humanity, that they were in the group because they had something special that other people did not. I feel like a broken record when we do these cult stories. Cults always include an element of superiority. God's chosen people, born of goodly parents, chosen in the pre-existence before this earthly life for a special mission. They have a third eye, a mind that others do not. This is how cults rope people in because there are people who want to feel superior. There are also people who feel like they're special, but nobody sees their specialness. So when they get around somebody like Keith Raniere that tells them, you have this special mind, these special abilities, it really feeds something that they're looking for. There are people who want to feel like they know something other people do not. Spoiler alert, these people never know anything other people do not, and in fact, usually know less than other people about the way life works and how evil people can be. This is part of what makes them susceptible to cults. They are broken. They are vulnerable. And while we do poke fun at cults, the reason I discuss them is because they hurt people. Cults hurt people, period. And by making these episodes and discussing the way cults work, maybe we can help stop someone from becoming a victim. So in these sessions, the women were laid down on massage tables, and then they would have like energy healing or whatever. I mean, I've had a Reiki session before. There's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. But they had a female osteopath involved. She was practicing some sort of like new age healing on the women. Later on, the women would be laying on these massage tables for a very different reason. They would be stripped naked and laid on these tables to be branded. We are getting there. There is a documentary about this story on HBO called The Vow. I have tried to sit through it several times, and I am a documentary lover, but I just find this documentary boring. Just kind of the way it's put together, it's long, and there's a lot of talk about the methods used to manipulate people, but it's more the way that it's presented. There's this kind of dreamy overtone. Everyone is very soft-spoken and kind of robotic. I don't know, maybe I'm alone here, but I just don't find this to be one of the better documentaries I've watched. But in the documentary, you hear the cult members, former cult members, talk about how they were kind of hypnotized by this whole thing. They truly believed that they were on this higher plane of consciousness, that they were more awake and more aware. They tell stories about how they believed that Keith Raniere was this incredible man with an amazing mind, and how they truly believed he was making the world a better place by raising the consciousness of humanity. Keith told his members that they were part of this great and important work. They were going to make the world a more loving and peaceful and unified place. They were going to vanquish the world of fear and anger, and the members thought it was a beautiful thing. They believed they had a place in this magnificent work, and their mission was so important that they were literally saving the world. As the cult grows, it begins to attract some celebrities. And one of those celebrities is Allison Mack. She was actually brought in by another actress. Allison Mack got famous on the TV show Smallville, which I've never seen. I know it was popular. It's about Superman when he was a teenager. Clark Kent is a teenager growing up in Smallville, Kansas, not knowing that his fate is to become this superhero with great powers. Allison Mack plays a character named Chloe Sullivan, who is an independent, intelligent, and curious girl who is Clark Kent's best friend. In reality, Allison Mack was a very insecure, unhappy person who felt less than some of her more beautiful Hollywood counterparts. Now, this show ran for 10 seasons. People really liked it, and it brought Allison Mack a lot of fame. A few seasons in, the writers brought in a character to play Lois Lane. The actress playing the part of Lois Lane was Erica Durance, who is a very beautiful woman, and many people speculate that this threw the already insecure Allison Mack into a tailspin. Erica Durance has gone on to tell the media that Allison Mack made her feel very unwelcome on the set, and they did not have a good relationship. It is at this point in Allison Mack's unhappy life that she begins to seek something more, something bigger, and she is introduced to Keith Raniere and NXIVM. Another actress on the show, Kristen Kruk, was introduced to the cult by her boyfriend, and she took Allison to a few meetings. After a couple of meetings in the cult, Kristen realized this is a cult, and she was like, I'm out, but Allison was hooked. Kristen would later stage an intervention to try to get Allison Mack out of the cult, but it didn't work. Also, Allison Mack is a child actor. She'd been acting since she was 7 years old, and we know that child actors tend to suffer from psychological trauma, and they are often abused. This was a vulnerable woman in the beginning. What she did later on is inexcusable. All of this took place around 2006 when the cult was at its peak. There were other actresses involved as well. Women who were working on Battlestar Galactica became involved in the cult. And if you watch those old episodes, apparently you can physically see the women devolve as their involvement in the cult becomes more serious. Because you see, this makes me so mad. One of the most important elements of cult life was that the women had to be very, very thin. You can watch the actresses in this cult get thinner and thinner on their shows. Allison Mack became enthralled with Keith Raniere. He was a god to her. Allison was a celebrity, and so Keith quickly moved Allison up the ranks into the position of master. The ideas of wellness and self-actualization appealed to Allison, and she thought she had found what she had been looking for her entire life. Instead, this cult activity would be her downfall. Allison began recruiting more women to join NXIVM, and being a celebrity, this was easy for her. Other women felt special. They felt chosen when, this famous person approached them. They wanted to be in the same orbit as this famous actress, and they lined up in droves to participate. Before long, things took a turn. Don't you even pretend to be shocked. You know where you are, and you know what happens next. As we see in many, many cults, Keith Raniere begins having sex with his female followers. These guys all follow the same playbook while claiming they are the one and only special person that has this one truth. It rarely changes, male or female. They are boinking their followers. It's all about power and control and money and sex. Keith Raniere began putting his followers on very strict diets, and I don't mean like eat 600 calories a day diets. Check this out. The women would have to send a text message to Keith Raniere asking, "Can I eat 86 calories?" and then wait for a reply. Each and every time the women wanted to eat something, they had to text this idiot and ask him if they could eat the food and report to him the number of calories that food had in it. They were not allowed to eat anything until they heard back from Keith Raniere, and if the answer was no, they didn't eat. I would bitch slap this little thumb into the next life. I cannot imagine, and I grew up in a high demand religion. I cannot imagine letting someone have that type of control over me, which is also why I left the high demand religion. You've heard that story. But Keith Raniere, he is so obsessed with having control over these women that he makes them report their calorie intake to him. Not daily, with everything they eat. Keith Raniere starts having sex with 3 sisters who joined his cult. Their parents desperately tried to save them from this man. I cannot even imagine what that would be like. I feel so sorry for these parents. These women were convinced that they were working towards fulfilling their wildest dreams, and no one could tell them otherwise. Keith, and only Keith, had the keys to higher consciousness. Many of these women were from wealthy families who would pay thousands and tens of thousands of dollars for NXIVM courses. If these women recruited new members, they got a discount. They would pay $5,000, and as soon as that course was complete, they'd be told, oh, now you're ready for the next level. And oh, by the way, the next level course is $15,000. Within NXIVM, a secret subgroup called DOS was formed in 2015. DOS stands for Dominus Obsequious Sororium. DOS was a secret society of women who were at the top. Those women were Keith's most devoted followers. The Latin phrase Dominus Obsequious Sororium means master over obedient women. Bitch slapped into the next life. Keith Raniere called himself the Grand Master. You know who else I think has a Grand Master? Maybe it's Grand Wizard. I don't know. But, same concept. One of these women at the top was actress Sarah Edmondson. She was recruited to believe that she was joining a totally underground group of women working together to be a force for good in the world. She came to believe that she was in an elite group with special powers that was going to change the world. Allison Mack was then promoted and given the title Top Lieutenant in NXIVM, and she began grooming the women, coercing them to have sex with Keith Raniere. Allison Mack is responsible for the resultant abuse of many, many women, and no matter how insecure, how broken a person is, she knew right and wrong. She chose to overlook her own morality in order to be part of this sick little weasels group, and I find that sad, but it also angers me. Now, remember those massage tables we talked about earlier? Yeah. Somehow, Keith Raniere and Nancy Salzman, along with Allison Mack, get this idea into their heads. What are they going to do? Open a domestic violence shelter with all this money? Start a soup kitchen? No. Oh no, they are going to brand the women in the cult with Keith Raniere's and then eventually Allison Mack's initials. Like brand them with a hot branding iron. On the date of this event, the women are led into the room with the massage tables and told to strip naked. The first woman gets on the table, not knowing what is going to happen to her, and then the hot branding iron is presented. This woman is, of course, terrified and doesn't know what's happening, but she is coerced and talked to, and finally she relents. She has no idea what is going on her body, but when she stands up in terrible pain, crying and shaking, she looks down at her hip bone and she has the initials KR branded on her body. This is just one of the most repulsive, inhumane, and disgusting acts I've ever heard of. I mean, outside of murder, when it comes to cults. The other women in the room become terrified. They begin crying. Some of them refuse, but others do not. And this is all made worse by the fact that it was a doctor that was doing the branding. A woman named Danielle Roberts, who claims she had taken a vow of obedience to Keith Raniere, was doing the branding. In the end, 17 women were branded with Keith Raniere's initials and some with Allison Mack's initials. A cottering device was used in the pelvic regions without anesthesia to intentionally cause the women pain. They ended up with KAR and AM branded on their bodies, some near their genitals. The purpose of this brand? To symbolize the women's status as sex slaves for Keith Raniere. This doctor would go on to lose her medical license. How she didn't go to prison, I don't know. She tried to get her medical license back years later, but she was denied. It is the act of branding women that finally wakes up some of the members, but more importantly, it infuriates their husbands, boyfriends, and family members who begin speaking out and going to the police about what is happening inside this cult. Now, there is a lot more to this story. I told you this is just kind of a refresher about how we get to this next point, and that is Keith Raniere is arrested and put on trial. In 2018, after an investigation, Keith was taken into custody in Tucson, Arizona, and was held until his trial. In 2020, Raniere was convicted and sentenced to 120 years in prison in a federal court. He was convicted of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, attempted sex trafficking, forced labor, and wire fraud conspiracy. Also, I have to be skirt around some things I say here, but some of these victims were children. So if he wasn't already the creepiest of the creeps, he's even worse. He was also fined $1,750,000. Now, the women, for the most part, abandoned Keith Raniere, and that's good for them. This act of branding the women pushed them over the top. And while I believe they should have known well before this happened that they were in a cult, I will not judge them because we know the power of brainwashing and the cult mentality. So Keith Raniere has been sitting in prison since 2020, but just months ago, in January of 2025, Alan Dershowitz came forward with shocking new allegations, not about Keith Raniere, but in defense of Keith Raniere. Sometime in 2024, Keith Raniere hired Alan Dershowitz, and the famous or infamous attorney has made shocking allegations. They involve photographs of naked, I'm going to say females here, who are under the age of 18. Dershowitz is claiming that FBI agents doctored these photos to make the prosecution and the jury believe that the people in the photos were not 18. They were under 18. I will let him tell you himself about what he believes happened.
That the main piece of evidence used to convict this man and sentence him to life imprisonment was tampered with and manipulated by the government in order to change the facts and reduce the age of a female from above the age of consent to below the age of consent. If this is true, it's a staggering government act of misconduct. And as they say, it's always in the cover-up. And the government is desperate not to have a hearing. They do not want the public record to show that 7 experts, including some who worked for the FBI, who they used to get convictions against people, are now saying that this was a tampered piece of evidence. And an expert hired independently from outside confirms that. There is no reason in the world for not having a hearing except to cover up government misconduct. They had an alleged very, very, very weak case against the defendant. Very weak. He easily could have won the case. And then at the last minute, they, quote, discovered a photograph of a female naked who they claim was underage. Now, once you introduce into evidence anything involving an underage female, the case is over. That's why another defendant immediately pleaded as soon as he saw this. Every lawyer knows that you can't win a case when you have a photograph naked of an underage girl. Well, it turned out, according to these experts, that the government manufactured this piece of evidence, that there was a photograph, but that the woman was above the age of consent, which would make it not a crime at all. And they manipulated the evidence in ways that showed the jury falsely that she was underage. Now, if this is true, then an innocent man is spending the rest of his life in prison. And all we want to do is have an opportunity to prove what experts have already said is true. And remember, the experts are former FBI agents, people who were relied on by the FBI to put guilty people in jail. And now these same people are saying, hey, this is an innocent person whose evidence has been manufactured, constructed, manipulated, tampered with in order to create a guilty verdict against an innocent person. Why shouldn't we have a hearing? And this doesn't only involve Mr. Raniere, it involves every American, when you have somebody in jail who is there as a result of tampered with government evidence, it's the Soviet Union, it's Iran, it's China. It's not the United States of America. We don't put people in jail on the basis of manufactured evidence. Seeing a tremendous lack of trust against FBI leadership. Now, we don't know for sure who did this, who did the manipulation. The experts can't tell us that yet. Maybe they can once they get all the information, but the government has suppressed much of the information. We only came upon this exculpatory information very late in the game. And so we don't know the extent of it. We don't know if it goes to the top, if it's just one recalcitrant FBI agent. That's not the issue. The issue is the government from the top refuses to have a hearing.
Alan Dershowitz says that his client deserves an evidentiary hearing or a new trial, claiming that a crucial piece of evidence used to convict him was doctored to make a young woman appear underage. Now, there are people who have seen this evidence that state it is compelling. Keith Raniere is now 63 years old, and his new attorney is claiming he is being denied due process. It will be up to a judge to determine whether or not Alan Dershowitz and his client's claims meet the standard of evidence to merit a new trial. So far, they have not been successful in getting a hearing date. Now look, if this did happen, if photos were doctored, that should be investigated. It is solely the responsibility of Dershowitz to build a convincing argument that persuades a judge to hear this case and hear these allegations for the first time. Whether Alan Dershowitz will be successful remains to be seen. But let's say that this did happen. Let's say that they doctored some photos. This man manipulated many women into having sex with him. That doesn't give you life in prison. But do you know what does? Torturing 17 women. Sex trafficking women does. Wire fraud does. So even if these new allegations turn out to be true, this man should never, ever get out of prison. Allison Mack ended up being charged as well. In April of 2019, she pled guilty to racketeering and conspiracy charges. She went to prison but was released early in July of 2023. She is free. She's now 42 or 43 years old, and she has publicly renounced Keith Raniere. She says joining the cult was the worst mistake of her life, and she deeply regrets her involvement and subsequent actions. Allison Mack is a perpetrator. She is a victim who became a perpetrator. I feel for the women who were brainwashed. I do. And a big part of the reason I am so invested in talking about cults is to raise awareness. I want to help people learn to spot these insidious leaders and groups so they don't fall victim to them. But as far as Keith Raniere goes, this man is a malignant narcissist who should never, ever see the light of day again. He is evil, he is abusive, and he is dangerous. Whether his new attorney is successful or not, he should stay right where he is, locked up for the rest of his life, so he can never do anything like this again. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. It helps a lot. I want to give a special thank you to my patrons. Your support means the world to me. If you haven't yet, would you give a listen to my podcast, Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee? It's on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. I post brand new episodes every Monday and Wednesday. You know, we've always got our fundraiser going. Watch this short video on my channel to learn how you can donate a few bucks to a great cause. We are trying to help solve some cold cases. Again, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. Stay safe and be kind to each other, and I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.